You've heard that compassion is the path to peace. You practice metta meditation, wishing all beings well, and yet sometimes your kindness opens a wound instead of a heart. What if the very practice meant to purify your love can, in certain contexts, backfire, triggering codependency, burnout, or even violence? I'm Silent Flame. Today, we'll venture into compassion's shadow, the pitfalls lurking beneath loving kindness, and how to wield this precious quality without cutting yourself or others. Crossing boundaries. Over-identifying with another's suffering can erode your own sense of self, turning generosity into endless giving. The martyr's trap. Feeling only your suffering matters unless you save everyone else. You risk exhaustion and resentment. Real life story. A volunteer aid worker so driven by metta, she ignored her own health, ultimately collapsing and losing trust in her practice. Compassion versus pity. True compassion empowers. Pity disempowers, reinforcing hierarchy and attachment. When tough love turns cruel, a teacher's harsh, compassionate intervention, shaming, or aggressive correction can traumatize rather than heal. Case study. A Zen instructor's abrupt koan challenge that sparked trauma reenactment in one student, showing that intention alone doesn't guarantee kindness. Hero's burden. Many cultures glorify the self-sacrificing savior, teaching us that real compassion means endless sacrifice. This script can drive helpers to overload their capacity, leading to chronic stress and eventual breakdown. Rescuer syndrome. When compassion becomes a role, I must fix everyone's pain, we adopt an identity that collapses the boundary between self and other, blurring needs and fueling dependency. Example, a therapist who, trained to always be available, found themselves answering crisis texts at 3 a.m., losing sleep, and eventually developing severe burnout and resentment toward the very clients they once loved. Mirror neurons on overdrive. Our brain's mirroring system enables us to feel another's emotion, but when you're repeatedly exposed to intense suffering, your mirror neurons can trigger chronic empathic distress, not just empathy. Compassion. Fatigue. Studies show that caregivers and first responders exhibit elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep patterns, and even immune suppression, a clear sign that unregulated compassion harms the body as well as the mind. Brain imaging insights. Functional MRI scans of compassion experts reveal that balanced practitioners activate prefrontal regulatory regions, whereas those overwhelmed by empathic stress show hyperactivity in the insula and amygdala, areas linked to pain and anxiety. Permissive enabling. Out of kindness, we may excuse harmful behaviors, tolerating addiction, toxic relationships, or injustice, in the name of being non-judgmental, allowing harm to continue. Impaired autonomy. When we overhelp, we rob others of the opportunity to develop their own resilience. True compassion empowers autonomy. False compassion fosters dependency. Case in point, a caregiver's insistence on doing everything for an elderly parent led to the parent's loss of mobility and self-efficacy, creating a cycle of learned helplessness. In the practice of metta, the line between generosity and self-neglect can blur. Skillful boundaries are your first shield against compassion's burnout. Intentional time limits. Establish clear start and stop signals for your giving. Set a timer for each email, call, or visit, then consciously release. Ritualize transitions. After each helping act, pause for a brief grounding, 3 mindful breaths, to reclaim your center. Emotional checkpoints. Use a simple compassion gauge. Pause at regular intervals to rate your emotional energy on a 1 to 10 scale. If energy dips below 5, shift to self-care protocols, rest, gentle movement, or guided metta directed inward, rituals of replenishment, daily self-metta. Spend 5 minutes each morning as recipient of your own kindness. May I be safe. May I be whole. Nature immersion. Weekly walks where you offer metta to trees, stones, and sky, reminding yourself that care flows in all directions. Selective presence. Intentionally choose which suffering to engage with. Not every call for help is yours to answer. Practice saying "not now" or "I need rest" without guilt. Honoring that sustainable compassion requires replenishment. Boundary allies. Share your limits with a trusted peer or mentor who can remind you when you've overextended. Create a buddy system. Before entering a high-need situation, check in with each other on readiness and capacity. Boundaries aren't barriers to kindness. They're the scaffolding that makes compassionate action possible. True empathy weathers storms. By cultivating resilience, we convert empathic distress into a source of genuine connection and insight. Mindful self-compassion. When distress arises, apply the 3 components. Recognize suffering, feel common humanity, offer yourself soothing words, use informal gestures, placing your hand on your heart or stroking your forearm to anchor the warmth of self-care. Compassionate reframing. Reinterpret empathic pain as information, not ailment. This ache tells me what matters to me. Practice cognitive shifts. Replace "I can't stand their pain" with "I choose to bear witness with presence." Emotional release practices. Incorporate cathartic methods, journaling, vocal expression, or movement to discharge accumulated empathic energy. Schedule emotional detox slots. 15 minutes of spontaneous expression, tears, laughter, dance, to prevent build-up. Meta-awareness training. Develop the ability to observe your empathy from a secure witness perspective, noticing sensations without merging. Use anchor phrases. "I am here. I notice this feeling, but it is not all of me." Wise-hearted action. Planning. After periods of high empathic engagement, craft a simple recovery plan. Rest, social support, creative outlet. Translate empathy into sustainable service by choosing one concrete action, a letter, a donation, a single visit, rather than open-ended commitment. Resilient empathy is like tempered steel, flexible enough to bend with suffering, strong enough to hold you upright. True metta arises not from limitless giving, but from an even-minded heart, one that loves without clinging and cares without collapse. Understanding equanimity, upekkha. Equanimity isn't indifference, but balanced presence. You see suffering clearly, without being overwhelmed. Sanskrit roots, to look beyond, the capacity to hold joy and pain, self and other, in one spacious embrace. Training the mind for balance. Dual aspect meditation. Alternate 5 minutes of metta, wishing "may all beings be happy," with 5 minutes of upekkha, wishing "may all beings be free from bias." Visible reminders. Place 2 stones on your altar. One warm-colored for compassion, one cool-colored for equanimity. Touch each before practice to attune the corresponding quality. Case illustration: the overzealous volunteer, a humanitarian worker driven by boundless metta, collapsed into chronic stress. By integrating equanimity practices, daily observer meditations on neutral scenes, clouds, flickering candle, she regained steadiness and renewed her service sustainably. Equanimity in action. Practical tips. Neutral. Witnessing. When facing distressing news, pause to observe your emotional reaction without judgment before deciding how to help. Compassionate detachment. When providing support, set a clear intention. I offer care, but will not carry, to prevent emotional entanglement. Equanimity equips the heart as a vessel, neither too brittle to shatter under sorrow, nor too rigid to hold joy. Individual compassion flourishes within a community of care. By organizing collective efforts wisely, we prevent helper fatigue and multiply impact. Building sustainable support networks, rotating teams, in long-term aid projects, alternate caregivers weekly, ensuring no one carries the weight alone. Shared leadership, empower multiple coordinators to plan, debrief, and rest, preventing hierarchical burnout. Compassionate infrastructure resource pools, create communal libraries of self-care tools, guided audio, yoga mats, art supplies that anyone can borrow when distressed. Wellness hubs, designate safe spaces at workplaces or retreat centers stocked with grounding aids, weighted blankets, herbal teas, cushions. Example, the community clinic model. A free urban health clinic instituted bi-weekly staff meta circles, where caregivers practice shared loving kindness, then rotated into equanimity labs, silent reflection. Outcome, 35% reduction in staff absenteeism and higher patient satisfaction. Protocols for group resilience. Early warning systems. Train team members to recognize secondary trauma cues, irritability, withdrawal, sleep disturbances, and trigger peer check alerts. Regular debriefs, short facilitated sessions after intense work periods to process emotions, set protective intentions, and identify follow-up needs. Ethical collective boundaries, consent culture. Before launching group aid, discuss and agree on scope, what you will and won't do, so volunteers avoid mission creep. Funding safeguards. Transparently allocate time and money for caregiver well-being, retreat stipends, therapy reimbursements, embedding self-care into budgets. When compassion spreads across many hearts, it becomes a river, strong, self-renewing, and far-reaching. To prevent compassion collapse, we must weave self-care, community support, and equanimity into every level of practice. The 3-tier model: self-tier, daily metta and upekkha practices; personal boundary rituals, emotional release strategies; peer-tier, buddy systems, shared debriefs, mutual skill shares, and self-care techniques; system-tier, organizational policies mandating rest cycles, mental health resources, leadership training in trauma-informed care. Case study: the Mindful NGO, an international relief organization, integrated the 3-tier model across offices. After 1 year, staff surveys showed a 50% drop in burnout scores and a 20% increase in reported job fulfillment. Sustainable compassion blueprint audit. Your ecosystem. Map out existing supports and gaps at each tier. Identify where compassion leaks into exhaustion. Action plan. Assign clear roles for self-care champions, peer mentors, and policy advocates who ensure ongoing attention to well-being metrics. Invitation to collective ritual. Propose a quarterly Circle of Kindness event. Gather all stakeholders, practitioners, staff, community members for guided metta, equanimity meditations, and open sharing. Reinforce bonds and recommit to compassionate standards. An ecosystem of compassion honors both the giver and receiver, nurturing a resilient web of care that endures beyond any single act. In immersive group settings, retreats, aid missions, or long-term volunteer stints, the structure itself must guard against collective burnout. Rhythmic pacing, micro-ritual cycles, alternate 45 minutes of focused meta-practice with 15 minutes of rest or journaling, preventing emotional overload. Day of silence versus day of sharing. Schedule whole days, dedicated solely to communal processing, no formal meditation, to integrate experiences safely. Emergency compassion buddies. Rapid response pairing. Assign a floating compassion buddy who can be summoned anytime via agreed signal, ready to guide grounding exercises on the spot. Crisis drill rehearsals. Before deep practice begins, run a brief simulation. If someone panics or dissociates, buddies practice calm re-entry protocols, simple touch, guided breath. On-call support teams, Dharma, guides and clinicians ensure at least one mental health professional and one senior meditation teacher are on-site 24/7, rotating shifts to prevent exhaustion. Mobile support kit. Equip teams with portable grounding tools, handheld stones, scented oils, audio players loaded with brief loving-kindness tracks for field interventions. Integration workshops. Host daily compassion in-out circles. Participants share one moment of deep connection and one moment of overwhelm, then receive peer feedback on boundary strategies. Retreats should be sanctuaries, not pressure cookers. Protocols transform deep practice into sustainable transformation. To extend compassion to those with PTSD or neurodivergence, environments must adapt, honoring diverse needs without diluting meta's potency. Flexible practice modalities. Modular sessions offer choices between seated, walking, and creative meta practices, art, sound, so individuals can engage in the mode that best regulates their nervous system. Variable duration tracks provide short 5 to 10 minutes, medium 15 to 20 minutes, and long 30 plus minutes. Practice modules. Practitioners choose based on daily capacity. Sensory environment controls, lighting options, adjustable warm to cool lights to prevent sensory overwhelm or dissociation in trauma survivors. Soundscaping zones, quiet areas, soft music areas, and natural sound areas. Participants use headphones or room assignments to match their sensitivities. Clear movement pathways, open floor plans, remove clutter, define clear walking routes for mindful movement, reducing anxiety for those with spatial awareness challenges. Anchor stations. Stations equipped with simple tools, stress balls, meditation benches, tactile fabrics, so participants can self-regulate without interrupting group flow. Communication protocols, signal cards, color-coded cards. Participants display silently to request guidance, pause, or peer check-in without speaking. Written check-ins. Use brief digital forms or paper logs after each session to note distress signals, ensuring no emotional cues get lost in silence. Trauma-sensitive design isn't coddling. It's creating the respectful container in which all hearts can safely open. As meditation enters clinics and hospitals, collaborative care models define the frontier, melding neuroscience, therapy, and Dharma. Co-leadership frameworks, dual roles in practice. Psychiatrists co-lead guided compassion sessions, while mindfulness teachers facilitate clinical group therapy, each respecting the other's expertise. Shared case reviews. Weekly meetings where clinicians and Dharma teachers review participant progress, adjust care plans, and refine risk protocols collaboratively. Evidence-informed adaptations. Guideline development. draw on large-scale MBSR or MBCT data to craft compassion-based interventions tailored for PTSD, bipolar disorder, and empathy-related burnout. Safety checklists. Standardized forms to screen for psychosis risk factors before prescribing compassion-intensive exercises. Training and certification. Mindful psychiatry fellowships. Year-long programs certifying clinicians in contemplative neuroscience, trauma-informed care, and ethical meta-pedagogy. Ongoing supervision pools. Regional networks of mentors offering case consultations, crisis debriefs, and shared research updates. Policy and insurance advocacy accreditation standards. Collaborate with professional boards to recognize compassion therapy as a reimbursable service. Outcome metrics. Define success beyond symptom reduction. Include measures of relational health, self-compassion scores, and community resilience. When science and spirit collaborate, compassion becomes both an art and a rigorously tested therapeutic tool. In this segment, we've structured retreat protocols that balance deep practice with crisis prevention, designed trauma-sensitive and neurodiverse-friendly environments, mapped the integration of compassion into psychiatric care through collaborative frameworks and evolving standards. In cities and rural regions alike, pioneering centers are proving that large-scale compassionate care is possible without sacrificing caregiver well-being. The Compassion Collective, Australia. Overview. Integrated community hub offering meta-groups, peer-led support, and clinician-facilitated therapy. Innovation. Weekly compassion labs, where volunteers learn boundary setting, biofeedback, and group debriefing. Outcomes. 80% reduction in volunteer turnover. Measurable rise in community mental health indices. Heart Mind Clinic, South Africa. Overview. Rural Outpatient Centre, blending traditional Ubuntu principles with meta-based interventions. Innovation. Mobile care caravans. Deliver short compassion workshops and basic self-care toolkits to remote villages. Outcomes. Reported 60% decline in caregiver burnout rates. Increased local capacity for mutual aid networks. Urban Kindness Network, Canada. Overview. Municipal program partnering health departments with mindfulness teachers to run compassion cafes. Innovation. Pop-up safe zones in public spaces where passers-by receive quick guided meta breaks and resource referrals. Outcomes. Over 10,000 engagements in 6 months. Participants report feeling more resilient and connected. These global exemplars show that when compassion is institutionalized with care for caregivers, impact scales sustainably. To embed compassion into societal frameworks, leaders need clear policies, funding mechanisms, and accountability structures. Compassion Charter for organizations. Principles. Explicit commitments to regular self-care budgets, mandatory debrief cycles, and mental health leave for caregivers. Implementation. Annual compliance audits, public reporting of caregiver wellness metrics, and incentive grants for high-performing agencies. Municipal Compassion Council structure, cross-sector committees, health, education, social services that convene quarterly to coordinate compassion initiatives. Mandate. Review local needs, allocate resources for training, and develop emergency compassion response plans for crises, e.g., natural disasters. Funding and insurance alignment advocacy. Push for reimbursement codes covering compassion training and peer support facilitation, recognizing these as preventive health measures. Pilot programs. Government-backed grants for integrative compassion clinics. tied to outcome evaluations, reduced hospitalization, improved workforce retention. Policy codifies care, transforming isolated good intentions into robust systems that protect both givers and receivers. Leaders in every sphere can spark cultural shifts by modeling self-care, establishing supportive norms, and championing shared responsibility. Leadership self-care pledges. Executives publicly commit to regular debriefs, peer mentoring, and time off for self-compassion practices, normalizing boundary setting from the top. Compassion Champions Program. Trained volunteers within organizations who monitor team well-being, facilitate meta-micro breaks, and connect colleagues with mental health resources. Peer-led reflective circles, informal gatherings where staff rotate hosting compassion rounds, sharing successes, challenges, and boundary strategies in a confidential setting. Measurement and feedback loops. Use simple pulse surveys to gauge compassion climate. Frequency of debriefs. Rate of boundary violations. Levels of empathic distress, and iterate practices accordingly. When leaders embody and endorse compassion care, they create ripples that reshape organizational culture and community norms. Trajectories. The science of compassion is still evolving. Strategic research investments will illuminate how to optimize care for all. Neuroimaging of compassion, resilience. Longitudinal fMRI studies, tracking caregivers undergoing meta-training to identify markers of burnout resistance, e.g., sustained prefrontal regulation. Social network analyses, mapping how compassion practices propagate through communities, identifying superconnectors whose self-care habits significantly influence group well-being. Compassion, dose-response trials, randomized studies, varying meta-intervention intensity, minutes per day, group size, to establish minimal effective dose that maximizes benefit without adverse effects. Economic impact assessments, cost-benefit analyses comparing traditional care models with compassion integrated systems, quantifying savings from reduced turnover, fewer sick days, and lower healthcare utilization. By charting compassion's neural signatures and societal flows, we can refine interventions that safeguard both heart and mind, now and into the future. First responders, healthcare providers, and aid workers carry heavy emotional loads. Without practical toolkits, even the most dedicated can burn out. Pocket-sized grounding cards, laminated cards with brief scripts, a one-sentence meta reminder. May I stay steady? May I share wisely? A micro-pause breathing pattern and a self-check prompt. Keep in uniform pocket or ID badge holder for instant access during high-stress moments. Digital respite apps, curated smartphone apps offering 2-minute guided meta breaks, gentle soundscapes, and quick journaling prompts. Push notifications at randomized intervals to interrupt autopilot and invite mindful kindness. Peer debrief templates. Simple frameworks. What went well? What drained me? What boundary did I uphold or neglect? Use immediately post-shift in pairs, capturing insights before fatigue clouds memory. Wearable biofeedback devices. Wristbands measuring heart rate variability. Prompt subtle cues, vibration light, when stress markers spike, triggering a short self-compassion protocol. Micro self-compassion practices, techniques like the self-hug, crossing arms and gently squeezing, sends soothing signals to the nervous system in under 10 seconds. Kindness mantras, 5-word affirmations easily memorized and recited under the breath during hectic moments. By embedding these tools into everyday gear and habits, frontline heroes safeguard their well-being one small act at a time. True cultural shift begins early, when classrooms and training programs prioritize healthy compassion. Empathy becomes generative rather than draining. Curriculum integration K to 12 programs, weekly meta moments in homerooms, 2 to 3 minute guided kindness practices linked to social emotional learning standards. Professional training. Integrate self-compassion modules into medical, nursing, and social work education. Students learn both theory and lived practice. Teacher and trainer. Support faculty retreats. Brief in-service days dedicated to self-care and peer meta exchanges. Modeling boundary setting and mutual support. Coaching circles. Small groups of educators meet bi-weekly to share successes, challenges, and resource recommendations for sustaining compassion in the classroom. Compassion ambassadors. Select students or trainees to lead mini workshops on self-care rituals. Develop leadership and normalize open conversations about stress and recovery. Ambassadors curate resource boards, physical or digital, with quick access guides, links to support services, and reminders of meta practices. Assessment and feedback. Pre- and post-program surveys, measuring self-compassion, burnout risk, and pro-social behaviors. Data drives iterative improvements. Reflective journals or video diaries allow participants to chart personal growth and identify when practices need adjustment. Community partnerships. Schools partner with local clinics, non-profits, and mindfulness centers to co-host compassion fairs, public events celebrating wellness, sharing tools, and fostering cross-sector alliances. When institutions teach and model compassion wisely, they sow seeds for generations of resilient, caring citizens and professionals. Beyond formal systems, compassion springs from the ground up. These stories show how ordinary people create ripples of care. NeighborNet, USA. A grassroots network coordinating compassion circles in apartment buildings. Residents meet weekly to practice metta, share pantry items, and organize mutual aid. Result: reduced social isolation, quicker crisis responses, illness, eviction threats, and a marked increase in neighborhood trust. Care Chain, Brazil. Mobile WhatsApp groups linking volunteers with elders living alone. Daily check-in messages coupled with rotating in-person visits. Structured support protocols protect volunteers from overload. Each signs up for a maximum of 3 elders at a time, then rotates off to rest. Ubuntu Outreach, South Africa. Community-led Ubuntu circles blend storytelling, communal meals, and meta practices, reinforcing shared humanity and collective responsibility. Outcomes: decreased youth aggression, higher school attendance, and strengthened social cohesion in high-risk neighborhoods. Mindful Metro, Japan. Commuter-based programs offering pop-up guided meta sessions in train stations. 5-minute breaks for passengers, led by volunteer teachers. Impact: measurable declines in reported commuter stress, improved public mood, and heightened interest in local mindfulness courses. Digital compassion choirs. Online communities where participants record short self-compassion or meta messages that are compiled into compassion playlists shared across social platforms. These virtual choirs foster connection across distances and allow individuals to both give and receive kindness asynchronously. Grassroots compassion thrives when people take initiative, turning small acts of care into movements that transform communities. We've journeyed through compassion's pitfalls, from the thorns of codependency to the blooms of collective action. Now, let this final word be both torch and tether, igniting your resolve while reminding you to hold yourself and others gently. A poem of balance. In the gleam of kindness, remember the guard, a heart unbound yet tempered by regard. Let your flame burn bright, but steady and true, for compassion without care consumes me and you. A practice mandala center, a daily vow. May my kindness be wise and my boundaries be kind. Surrounding petals, metta, upekkha, self-compassion, community care, rest, ritual, reflection, renewal. Guiding questions. Where has my love for others overshadowed my love for myself? How can equanimity strengthen my giving today? Who in my community might need a compassionate boundary reminder? Commitment ritual. Light, a candle, physical or mental, and speak the vow aloud. Place an object of care, stone, mala, or photo, beside it as witness. Each evening, bow to the object, acknowledging both courage and care. Carry this invocation as testament. True compassion honors both the giver and receiver, weaving courage with the gentlest of threads. Knowledge alone cannot transform. Action and community carry the spark forward. Here's how you can join in weaving a web of wise kindness. Share your story. Post a brief reflection on social media or in your local Sangha, using the hashtag #WiseKindness to connect with others navigating this path. Form a boundary buddy pair. Reach out to a friend or colleague and agree on regular check-ins about giving practices and rest needs. Host a micro-compassion workshop. In your workplace, school, or neighborhood, offer a 20-minute session on setting compassionate boundaries and self-care rituals. Contribute to the collective protocol repository. Share one practical tool or protocol you've found effective. Itai, grounding card script, debrief template, on open source platforms like GitHub or community forums. Advocate for compassion standards. Encourage local organizations or leaders to adopt at least one compassion charter principle, such as mandatory debriefs or mental health leave for staff and volunteers. By taking these steps, you become torchbearer and architect, building compassionate spaces that honor every heart's fragility and strength. Offered a closing invocation, a poetic and ritual framework to hold courage and care in tandem, laid out concrete invitations to share, support, and institutionalize wise compassion, framed compassion as a community craft, co-created through stories, protocols, and collective commitment. May your journey be marked by love that uplifts without draining, by empathy that connects without engulfing, and by a heart both fearless and tender. I am silent flame. Thank you for walking this path with me. Stay brilliant. Stay balanced.